Good afternoon from Washington, D.C. I'm Chuck Carr, ISRI's Vice President for Meetings and Conventions, and welcome to the latest in ISRI's virtual presentations dealing with COVID-19. This one on how electronics recycling is being impacted. Before we get started, there's a few things that we like to cover at each of these meetings. First of all, as with any ISRI event, we follow ISRI's antitrust policies and code of conduct, and we've just put that information on the screen, on our chat screen. If you have not seen that before, you can go to isri.org/antitrust and download a copy. Keep in mind that these meetings are being recorded. The recording will be online and available for playback by ISRI members by about this time on Monday, perhaps earlier. And there's a couple other tips that we like to give to help you along with your presentations. First of all, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a toggle where you can switch between speaker view and gallery view on how you view our program. With gallery view, you get to see all of your friends and neighbors. When you go to speaker view, it gives you a larger screen for the speaker himself or herself. And we do recommend speaker view for our programs. Later today, if you have some questions, we're going to be certainly have some time to take questions for our presenters. And you have two ways that you can participate. First of all is using the chat function. And the chat box can be found if you go at the bottom of your video screen. You'll see several boxes at the bottom, and look for the one that says chat. If you click that, it'll open up a chat function. And at the bottom of that box, you can type in your questions and comments about how any questions that you might have for our presenters. We do ask when you do that that you send the question to everyone as opposed to an individual presenter. And that way we make sure that we don't miss any as we go forward. The other thing we'll be able to do, if you would like to comment on what's going on, you can use you can raise your hand and be recognized later on as we open up our microphones. To do that, once again, look down at the bottom of the screen and you'll see a box marked participants. If you'll click on that and then go to the bottom of that list, you'll see some functions that are listed down at the bottom. And typically over on the right-hand side, there'll be a blue hand that says raise hand. It may be under the ... additional items. If you click on that hand, it will put you in the order to be recognized. If for some reason your question gets answered before you're recognized, you just click it again, and it will remove your hand from the list. So either way, we'll be prepared to take questions as we go forward. Looks like we've got a lot more people that have joined us at this point. So with that, I'd like to turn this over now to ISRI's the chair of ISRI's Electronics Division, Craig Boswell, who will introduce the program and our moderator. Craig?
Excellent. Thank you, Chuck. I'd like to welcome you to the town hall from the Electronics Division. I'm about to introduce Reich Sandlin, and I can tell you I really, really appreciate what Reich has put together here. He's done an excellent job. I think you will find a lot of value in the presentations today. And I want to say a little bit, I know there's probably a few people on the call that aren't members of the Electronics Division, and I would like to just invite you, if you have questions about the Electronic Division, to reach out to me personally. I would love to answer those questions. I think, you know, I'm an original AER member of ISRI. For the few of you that are on this call that remember AER, that was the organization that was absorbed by ISRI that resulted in the Electronics Division. So I've been a member about a decade now. And I can tell you, we're going to talk about COVID today. In the last 4 to 5 months in this COVID experience, every dollar I ever spent in dues to ISRI has been paid back tenfold. I think the subjects we're going to talk about today, safety, operations, financial issues, each of those subjects, I've been on numerous calls, town halls, as part of my ISRI membership. The Electronics Division has a call every week, and I have gotten tremendous value for my company out of those town halls, out of the Electronics Division meetings. You know, we're not a very big company. Sometimes you feel like you're on an island, and I have not felt like I'm on an island. I feel like I'm on a ship that's heading in a difficult direction, facing a lot of headwinds, but I got a lot of people on that ship with me that are providing advice and guidance and steerage through these difficult times. And so hopefully, today we're going to add to that. We're going to add additional value. I've seen previews of the presentations, and I already learned things from previewing the presentations. So I appreciate you coming. Like I said, feel free to reach out to me personally if you have any questions about the division. I would love to answer those. But to kick off the event, I am going to turn it over to our host, Reich Sandlin.
All right, thanks, Craig, and welcome everyone. I think my slide is up now for electronics recycling in the post-COVID-19 world, but I think that's a misnomer because we're not really post-COVID-19, are we? We are kind of right in the middle of it, or on the heels of the first wave, or however we're going to talk about that. But part of the challenge that we all have is we don't have a crystal ball. We can't really anticipate what the future holds. Who could have anticipated that we would have dealt with what we've dealt with the past few months? So to echo Craig's comment, ISRI's been a key player in making sure that that many of us are on top of the situation, are able to understand the economics impacts, the health and safety impacts, how to protect our workers, our teams, and deal with operational issues and that sort of thing. So what we're going to talk about today is that, what are we seeing? Let me see if I can advance my slide. There we go. So what are we seeing out there in the marketplace, in our own operations, in our colleagues' operations? So we're going to talk about strategy briefly, what's going on. Tony Smith from ISRI's health and safety team is going to speak about protecting our teams, go into some depth there. Adam Shine of Sun King in Manitoba is going to talk about the operational impacts. And I'm not going to steal his thunder there. There's some great content there. Craig Boswell, who you just heard from Hobie, is going to talk about those economic forces, what is influencing our businesses right now. But to introduce our speakers just a little more depth, Tony Smith is Director of Safety Outreach for ISRI. He's been involved in safety education and training for over 20 years in the recycling industry. And has been involved in accident investigation, crane inspector, heavy equipment training, and a number of other things. And he's been in ISRI since 2013. So that's, he's been involved in this for a long time. He's been in many of our operations and has seen a lot. And he's spent a good bit of time recently in support of ISRI and its members, helping us figure out this COVID thing. How do we deal with protecting our teams? Adam Shine from Sun King, Manitoba, and Utility Recyclers International, man of many hats. He's been involved in the recycling industry for 11 years, but he grew up around it as well and represents fourth generation at Manitoba. One of his key responsibilities at Sun King is running the day-to-day operations, and Sun King focuses on electronics recycling. Adam has been involved in leadership at ISRI in the electronics division. He's the vice chair of the electronics division, and under Adam's watch, Sun King has expanded their operations over double in the past couple of years. And of course, that was before COVID, so I'll let Adam speak to that as well. And lastly, Craig is co-founder and president of Hobie International. He's been involved in the industry for many years. Like Craig, I was involved in IAER years ago before ISRI, and I count Craig as a friend and mentor in many ways. But he has has founded and run Hobie, or co-run, and has been involved heavily in especially the cell phone side of the business, and has been provided great advice to ISRI members on things like battery issues, that we all face with dealing with that kind of equipment. So I am Reich Sandlin. I've been in your shoes. I've been involved in the industry for about 15 years now, for mainly in the ITAD side of the business, IT Asset Disposition Services for enterprises. But I've run marketing, communications, compliance, environmental affairs, government affairs, and Chief Operating Officer as well. So I've kind of done it all, and so I've stood in your shoes or sat in your chair and seen what you're doing. I've also been involved in R2 development as co-chair of the R2 TAC, was chairman of the board of RIOS, has been actively involved in that, as well as other electronics division activities at ISRI. So I'm excited to bring what experience I have to the table to help you guys. After we go through each of these presentations, each of these talks, we will open things up for a Q&A with, you can use, as they said, the chat function, or raise your hand, and we will try to deal with that quickly. So just rapidly, a couple of slides here. As I was thinking about this, I asked my question, is this a crisis? Are we in the midst of a crisis, or are we in the midst of an opportunity? Well, it's both, right? The answer is both. A lot of our businesses have suffered. Absolutely. We can't get away from that. The economy has suffered. Health and safety. We know people that are in our businesses or our friends and family that have been affected by COVID and been affected by the shutdown, the recession. We have concerns about security. And then more recently, if COVID wasn't enough, we have all the social upheaval associated with inequality and racial issues and so forth. That's also impacting our businesses, impacting our employees. So let's recognize that part of this as crisis, right? But there's also the opportunity side. So as we've looked at this, as we've dug our heels in and really thought about how this impacts our business, we've adopted better health and safety practices. Tony's been great, the resource for us as we looked at that. As we see the markets start to reopen, as we see our clients start to reopen their doors, many of us have seen some pent-up demand coming back. So, we're seeing increases or spikes in volume. So it looks a little bit more like a V-shaped recovery instead of a U-shape. So that's exciting as the economy rebounds. I've also, in talking with those in the industry, I'm seeing some discussion of new business models. Some, taking advantage of their ability to provide products and services in new ways to the marketplace. And then, some are also recognizing that this period of social upheaval is an opportunity to double down on their commitment to diversity and equality in the workplace and in society. So, we don't want to just gloss over that. These are fundamental opportunities that companies are tackling. So, electronics recycling and ITAD is an entrepreneurial business. The entrepreneurs, you are entrepreneurs, and you're taking action. So we're seeing investments being made in systems, ERP systems, data erasure and automation processes, investments in operations. You'll hear some of this from Adam shortly, around facilities, organizations, certifications. People are doubling down on this, contributing. So, in the health crisis, ventilator manufacturing, face shields, helping distribute masks and food, supporting home-based businesses and home-based offices, work-from-home efforts, and home-based education, providing equipment and capabilities for that, and then creating. So strategies and business models and jobs, especially as the economy rebounds. So it's exciting to see this going on. Now is not the time to push pause on your business. Now is the time to push the accelerator. Let's push hard and move forward. move forward with excellence, business models, differentiation in the marketplace, excellence in your operations, and advancing people and culture for your business. I won't spend any more time on that. I wanted to highlight the exciting things that are going on in the midst of this crisis. So we are going to move on to Tony Smith here and allow him to talk to us about health and safety and how we deal with COVID as we allow employees to start coming back to the business and to the workplace. And there's my contact info. All right, Tony, you want to take over?
All right, thank you, Reich. I appreciate it, and thank you, Craig, for letting me address this group. Really appreciate that. Moving forward with excellence. I like that, Reich. And when it comes to health and safety, we need to be excellent at this time. So let me get my slides advanced here. So COVID is still very much with us. The dangerousness of the virus, of the pandemic, hasn't changed. It hasn't gone away. I believe that communication, strong communication amongst your business, amongst your peers, and with your family and your loved ones is key to this, is key to combating it from a health and safety perspective. Masks. There's a politics to not wanting to wear masks or to wearing masks that I do want to talk about a little deeper here, because they do work. They're not the sole thing that works out there, but they are part of the plan, part of the PPE that you should be using. So we did a great job as a country flattening the curve of COVID. We saw that happen when we shut down or locked down everything in mid-March. But it did do some damage to the economy, and we do need to get back to work. But this COVID-19 issue is, when we look at it from a business perspective, it's an industrial hygiene issue. And we've seen other industrial hygiene issues before, whether it's lead, cadmium, arsenic, hexavalent chromium, whatever you look at, there are ways to combat these. There are ways to put PPE or engineering or administrative controls in place so that we don't harm people. And we can do that with COVID also. So preparedness, planning, and teamwork. Before I jump into that, I just want to give you a bigger picture from the Osha perspective. And last week, a ruling came down where back in May, the AFL-CIO sued Osha to try to get them to create a standard on COVID preparedness. Federal court rejected the lawsuit, and OSHA's stance on that is that any new rulemaking, it's not necessary. They have the regulatory tools at their disposal to make sure that you, the employers, create hazard-free work environments. So OSHA continues to issue updated guidance to help you understand how to create a hazard-free work environment around COVID. The CDC has this. ISRI's government relations team and EHS team have been working very closely together to create guidance documents to help you as well. So for OSHA, it's back to business as usual. And for you, you are back to business as usual, or you're looking to get to that point, but you have to ask yourself, what is our risk level at our company? And this can be variable around the country and around the world based on COVID in your part of the country or the world. So step one, you need to review OSHA compliance, whether it's your state OSHA plan or federal guidance. Review that. And from a management commitment and employee involvement perspective, it's real important that you involve many different facets of your business when you're sitting down to plan this out, from senior management on through your system. Involve everyone because you're going to get different perspectives from all different levels of your company on how they feel about it. Do a worksite analysis. Hazard prevention and control, training, again, communication. Keep the training fresh. Make sure people understand what's going on and why are we instituting these new policies. Develop a plan and stick with the plan. So you should have a COVID-19 response and preparedness plan in place and stick with that plan. Now, talking about your risk level, CDC and Osha have guidance, and I'll show you in just a second a couple charts. So should you be operating? What is the COVID risk level in your area? Is it very high? Is it just high? Is it medium, or is it low? You have to base what's going on in your area on how you're going to be operating. Are you operating at an employee level of 50%, or are you at full capacity? So most of you should be at the low exposure risk, which you probably do not have contact with people known to be or suspected of being infected with SARS-CoV-2, or you're not in frequent close contact with them or in the general public. So how you're going about checking your employees is key here. Are you taking temperatures? Do you have that set up? Are you documenting this? And if an employee does come up with a high temperature, what are your protocols in place to send them home for isolation? So those should all be part of your plan. And again, documenting this stuff. And I know I'm talking to an audience who is very familiar with management systems and having plans in place. So that's why this is so important. And I think you understand that from the management system perspective. So when it comes to health and safety planning, again, involve folks from across a broad area of your company. Different perspectives are going to let you know how the plan is working at all levels of your company. The GR team at ISRI, Danielle Waterfield and Justin Short, put together some amazing resources, or pulled together in an understandable format from all of the states around the US. I would recommend that all of you find this resource or go to this resource, and I'll give you a link in my slides, but it is kept up to date regularly, and it will help you understand exactly what your state is asking you to do, because it is variable around the United States at least. So COVID exposure prevention, preparedness, and response plan. Have that at the ready. And these are things that, with OSHA back to business as usual, will probably ask you for if they came to visit. When it comes to OSHA, the reasons that they may visit you are employee complaints, targeted inspections, imminent danger, or a fatality. But being that we're in this time of COVID, it's most likely that they would want to see what you are doing to provide a hazard-free and safe workplace. So be consistent and firm with your guidelines. Use face coverings, social distancing, personal hygiene, temperature checks. And lastly, over the past 2 months, ISRI EHS has hosted open forums throughout the month of May for EHS and ISRI members, or EHS professionals and other ISRI members, to join in. And through those open forums, we have learned a lot about what you are doing from these perspectives you can see up on the slide right now. From a social distancing perspective, sanitizing, cleaning, hygiene, PPE, health screening practices, and so on, as you can see there. And I want to share a document with you real quick. So I'm going to switch gears just quickly and pop one up. Here we go. This is available on the ISRI website, but this is a deeper dive at step 4 that I just showed you on a slide. And it gets into many different ways you can apply administrative controls when it comes to social distancing. going on down to sanitation, cleaning, hygiene practices, PPE, and so on. So the importance of that list is that it has been developed from peers amongst the ISRI membership. So the resources are available to you. I encourage you to go to the ISRI website, but also follow OSHA and CDC guidelines. They are providing excellent information to us all right now, and we all do need to stay on top of this. So I'm going to hand my time back to Reich, and we'll take Q&A at the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Let's just go ahead and segue straight to Adam Shine to tell us about what he's doing from an operational standpoint and what he's seeing in the industry. Adam?
Very good. Thanks, Reich. Can everybody see my screen? All right, very good. So first of all, thanks to Reich and, of course, to ISRI for including me on the panel today. I want to talk a little bit about what we've done at Sun King to stay operational through, what has certainly been a challenging and difficult time. So if we get into it here, a little bit about myself. As Reich said, I'm VP of several different companies. I wear a lot of hats, though the majority of my time is spent on Sun King related activities. I'm the current vice chair of the division and membership chair for my local chapter as well. And I also sit on the Remade governance board. For those of you that don't know Remade, they focus on projects for funding related to recycling, manufacturing, materials optimization, et cetera. A little bit about Sun King. So Sun King was established in 2000. I'm not going to make it a big commercial, but we were established in 2000, which makes it our 20th anniversary. And I can tell you this is certainly not how we expected to celebrate 20 years as a company. But nonetheless, here we are. Our business is comprised both of B2C and B2B volume. We do participate in the New York State e-waste legislation. And we also handle commercial customers as well, which lends itself more to refurbish and resale side of the business, which we do also. All right, so I'm going to sort of take the COVID-19 scenario that we're dealing with, and I'm going to break it into both negatives and positives because, believe it or not, you may think it sounds crazy that there are some positives to be gained from this, but I firmly believe that there are. But first, we're going to start, of course, with the negative impact and how to handle and address the new normal. So the first is obviously employee concerns, and I think we want to create an environment where our employees feel safe, and we adhere to CDC and best practices, and so we have had to create several new procedures which ultimately can kill productivity to a certain extent. Staggered start times. One of the things that we've had in the past is employees all show up at the same time, right? They come in through the same door, they're punching the clock at the same time. And obviously that creates issues with too many people being unable to adhere to social distancing protocols. So one of the things we've done is we've staggered start times. So we have half of our current staffing level start at one time, and then 15 minutes later we have the second half of our team start. So one of the things that's done is cut down on the number of people. Furthermore, one of the things we did to make it easier and to have less people touching the time clock is we work with ADP. They have a solution where you can actually punch in on your smartphone. Let's face it, most people have smart devices now. And instead of having to punch in on the time clock, you can punch in right on your smart device. It's really cool technology too. So one of the things you might say is, well, how do you prevent somebody from being at home and punching in for the day, even though they're they're still laying in bed. Well, the reality is the way it works is it triangulates or pings your cell phone on the cell phone tower to within a certain number of feet of your facility. So once you get within, let's say, a 1 mile range of the facility, or 500 feet, for instance, you are then and only then able to punch in. So very cool technology. And again, it's less people touching the time clock and less touch points that we're concerned about. The other thing we've done is staggered break times, of course. Same thing. If you come in early, you take your breaks early, you take your lunch early. Furthermore, we've lessened the number of people that can be in the restroom at any given time, lessened the number of people that can be in the break room at any time. By staggering start times and break times, obviously, it does put a little bit of a damper on the activity in the warehouse. Typically the way we've done it in groups is we've done it by teams, so that if you're working on, let's say, LCD dismantle or PC dismantle, you will take a break at the same time as the rest of your team for obvious reasons, because you're working in conjunction with one another. But, there is something to be said for the shift and the change in terms of breaks and start times, slowing down or making it a little bit more difficult to get everything in place and everybody up and running. So it has definitely dampened the productivity to a little bit of a certain difficulty when it comes to starting at a specific time. Also, we have a new check-in questionnaire. So one of the things that we were mandated in New York State was to ask our employees every day, do you have COVID-19 essentially, or have you been in touch with anybody that has COVID-19? Are you feeling any of the effects of COVID-19? If they answer yes, and the way we've handled this, by the way, is, again, we've given out a web address. We also have iPads at the check-in areas, if you will, along with a bottle of sanitizer right next to it. So you can do it from your smartphone or do it on the tablet, but we're asking them how they're feeling. If they answer yes to any of the questions, they get a big red X that asks them to please return to their vehicle and call the sick line. And if they answer no to all of them, they get a green check and they're able to enter the facility and go to work. Obviously, we know that sometimes people can be asymptomatic. However, even if they are asymptomatic and they've been at work, if you catch them when they do have a fever, for instance, or they're feeling sick, you're at least limiting the exposure. You're not eliminating it completely, but you're limiting it. And finally, obviously, we have to give people additional cleanup time at the end of the day and lunch. We want people to wash hands more often. We have given sanitizer out to each of the employees, and certainly more breaks for more hand washing is critical. So, one of the things with the staff reduction was a remote workforce. Obviously, being in our business, you can't send everybody remote, because then nothing can be taken apart and nothing can be resold. But for those that we considered non-essential, meaning they could do their job remotely, they went home. And it made it difficult at first, because we really, even though I consider us a pretty progressive company, we didn't necessarily have all of the tools in place to operate in an efficient manner. So at first it was like, okay, how are we going to do our weekly meetings? How are we going to share documents? And and again, I said I talk about some of the positives. Well, I think this has brought us into a new world of technology. For instance, this platform that we're using now, I know Zoom was around long before COVID-19, but certainly the popularity of this application has greatly increased as a result of people working remotely. So we started to use tools like Zoom, like Microsoft Teams. That was a big one for us, where we started doing meetings on Teams, started sharing documents through Teams, chats through Teams. And, I will say too that we were less collaborative, and maybe perhaps we've become more collaborative now as a result of it. But it took a while, obviously, to implement those things. But again, it ended up being a blessing in disguise, I think, because it positions us better in the future. That said, it was tough. It was sloppy at the beginning, trying to figure out the best way to utilize some of these programs. Also as far as the floor is concerned, we had to separate people. For those that stayed in the office, we had to make more space on the floor. So instead of going, every workbench, we went every other workbench. That really led to issues specifically in the warehouse when you've got a demanufacturing line where, in our case, we have flat panels or CRTs where one guy will have his own responsibility as it relates to that product or that item, and then they'll slide it down a rolling conveyor to the next guy. Well, now the next guy can't be 2 feet away. He's got to be 6 feet away. So how do you effectively move it down? One of the ways we figured out was to use a powered conveyor in some cases instead of rolling conveyor, where you could start it and stop it. Some of the ways were just simply to push it down farther, or some of the other things that we've done is instead of pushing it down the line, each guy works on his own device. So I could tell you by them working on their own individual device, it's far less productive than having a team approach where each guy has his responsibility and he pushes it to the next. So these are all things that we're working on and trying to figure out the best way to approach. Staff reductions. I think when COVID hit, I can speak for me, I can't speak for anybody else, but there was definitely panic, right? What are we going to do? What does the world look like? I never have had to, in my career, think about laying a number of people off. But at the end of the day, you're responsible to do whatever you have to do to keep the business alive and thriving and have a place for people to return to. So when COVID hit, I remember I started working from home very quickly. It was stressful. Right? What does the future look like? Are we going to be here? Am I going to get paid? Is anybody in the staff going to get paid? Are we going to have any money? It was, and it was constantly changing by the hour. So ultimately, furloughs became necessary for us, and we had to get rid of 17 temps, which were easier to eliminate. And I think there was some bloat there, frankly. And we had to cut down 39 full-time people, mostly on the recycling side, because the resale side continued even after COVID to be pretty hot and kind of saved the day, if you will. We had a lot of material to sell, and ultimately we were able to continue to push product out because people were working remotely and were looking for a lot of that material to work from home. This is just a quote in eScrap News about the 39 employees. I will tell you that was a very difficult decision for me. However, with the government unemployment, it was helpful knowing that a lot of those people that we put furloughed were going to get more money than they get working for us on a day-to-day basis. So that did make it a little bit better. And we have since brought back 20 staff out of the 39 furloughed. So we have brought people back, and it's been helpful. As far as business, throughput down, obviously. With throughput down, less material to take apart, less commodities available for sale, less people to break down those commodities, and obviously, ultimately, as I said, less material to recycle or refurbish. We have seen a little bit of a spike in the last 2 weeks, which has been good and encouraging. I would say that the material is coming back a little bit faster on the residential side than it is on the B2B side. I know that, people working out of their homes were cleaning out their houses and looking for ways to recycle materials. So I have seen a nice bounce back on that side of the business. However, on the B2B side, which lends itself more to resale, it's been a little bit slower. Right now, I think if all things remain equal, we're probably going to be down overall for the year about 30% is my current forecast. Not ideal, certainly. Of course, as a result of COVID, we've had increased expenses, more PPE required. We have a requirement to wear masks. Masks are tough. They're hot. They fog up the glasses, and they're very difficult to communicate in. We've purchased temperature check equipment, so that instead of having to put a device up to somebody's forehead, they can look into a device and it'll flash green or red based on whether or not they have a fever. Of course, increased signage throughout the facility, and more staff personal space. Again, limiting the number of people in the restroom and the break rooms, really trying to ultimately spread people out. It's been very tough from a productivity perspective to deal with the new normal. And frankly, the one other thing that I want to point out from a negative perspective is that when people call in sick now, you have to have them out, and you have to have them out for a period of time, depending on what their symptoms are. And that's just something else you have to deal with. And every employee that's out obviously is less productivity. I'm going to try to speed through this a little bit because I'm a little over on time, but I do want to talk about the positive impact too, because I do believe that there is positive that has come from COVID-19 as well. And some of those positives are focusing on the business. You know, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do, how are you going to reinvent yourself? What if the world never gets back to normal? And, that sounds alarming, I'm sure. But what is normal? Is normal what we knew it to be? Is normal different? Are we wearing masks now everywhere we go, every time we travel? Is the world going to be a lot different? What does it look like? So focus on the business and where you want the business to go. Analyze past experiences. How have we done in the past? What are some lessons we can learn from the past? How can we take a process that was 5 steps down to 4 steps? These are things that we've been doing at Sun King with some great resources, time, and analysis. And really, I think they've helped us to sort of reposition where we want to go. Rebrand and re-strategize. How do you want ultimately your company's brand to grow and flourish? Do the things that mattered before still matter? Re-strategize. Are you more focused on the equipment, or are you focused on the people and the relationship? That's one thing I'll say, reconnecting with our customers. I was getting calls when we got into COVID, sales calls. And I was like, to be honest, I was like, what? I can't think about this right now. I'm trying to manage a business and I'm focused. I just felt like it was such a poor time and poor taste to be calling and trying to sell me a software solution, as an example. So how do we reconnect with our customers in a meaningful way that isn't just about handling volume? This is just another Recycling Today quote. I'll speed through it. Finally, a couple of things. Try new things with less resources. Consider business add-ons. We have collection events that we do on the New York State e-waste legislation side. These are Saturday events. One of the things that we've decided to do in order to minimize our expenses is to have people re-register for events, right? The more we know about how many people are anticipated to come, the more we can control back-end expenses. Another area that we've looked at is our resale and refurbish side. We've been selling a lot of material wholesale for a long time. And wholesale, we're in essence giving the material away at very reduced pricing. What can we do to build up those and ultimately build up that inventory and ultimately sell it to more end users? Business add-ons. I'm going to discuss that on the next slide. We came up with an idea called coronabuyback.com, and we went out and bought the URL. So one of the team's line of thinking was ultimately that, all these people are working from home. They're going to have all this material that they want to recycle or recoup value on because they've ultimately gone out and bought this equipment. How can we give them a mechanism to get some value back for their materials? So we came up with Corona Buyback. We put together a website. You can go on there. You can put your information in and upload some pictures, and we give you a price for that material. And this isn't meant to be, certainly not meant to be commercial, but an example of one way that we think we could acquire more volume as a result of COVID. Final thoughts. Obviously, first and foremost, you have to create a safe environment for your employees. So even if that hampers productivity, you really have no choice. Use your additional time to consider how the business may change and what the best way is to capture new market share. Corona Buyback is an example. Look at ways to limit expenses. And ultimately, I think it's important that every company now start planning for what could be a recurrence in the fall. Everybody says it's coming. Rather than wait and see, there's no harm in having a plan together for what that may look like. Reich, my apologies for going over, but I'll hand it back to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for inspiring us, Adam. Great stuff there. Let's move on to my superhero, Craig Boswell. Craig, take it away.
I thought you were going to introduce your superhero. I was waiting to see who that was going to be. Well, I appreciate Adam, appreciate Tony, great information. And I can tell you when I set up this presentation, my goal was to try to follow the theme of, yeah, there's negative, but there's positive. Unfortunately, when you're talking about the economy, it's really hard to find positive. There's a lot of negative out there, especially if you look at our sector. I will try to address both. It's interesting that I give a lot of talks. Some of you have heard me talk before, and usually when I start setting them up, my goal is to say, okay, what can I tell you that you don't know? Give you some information you carry away that you didn't walk in with. And then also, what can I tell you about what's coming down the pipe that you might help you when you get back to your job as you strategically plan. As I looked at this, and some of you see me talk say, well, you don't do that very well. But as I looked at this, you got to excuse me because I know that all of you are probably looking at these numbers and, they're concerning. And I'll go through several sector specific numbers that are concerning. And predicting what's going to happen going forward, if I could do that, I'd quit my day job and I'd either be shorting or buying stocks, but I can't tell you which one of those is a better idea, no more than anybody else can right now. I think the operative word right now is unprecedented. And a lot of times unprecedented is used in its hyperbole, right? It's not, there's a lot of, history is a great teacher. And certainly there's been a pandemic in 1918, there's been the downturn of 2008, 2009, but there's so many aspects of this situation that are unique. In 2008, 2009, the government didn't force the economy to contract. Essentially, we were forced to contract by the stay-at-home orders and so forth. And the pandemic in 1918, although it was worldwide, was pretty far in advance of the modern information age and how we're so interconnected with the rest of the world. So we are, I do feel, in a very unprecedented time. And because of that, it's going to be, up to us to be proactive in looking at different scenarios. And I will discuss some different scenarios and how our company might, react should those different scenarios come to fruition. So just looking at some of the negative economic figures that are out there, this is IDC's index on the IT spending. And this is an index, so if you look at this, 1,000 would be nominal, basically flat. Above 1,000 means the market is trending out. You will see that both in actual market indicators and what buyers are telling IDC, they're both predicting contraction in IT spending in the upcoming year. And I think that's somewhat reflective of capital budgets being contracted. There are companies that are in serious financial trouble, and therefore one of the first things to go is planned capital expenditures. And I think that's also a reflection of, some of the models that traditionally you would use to do IT upgrades have become far more complex than they were just, 6 months ago when everybody came in and they just dropped off their laptop. Well, if nobody's coming in, it's very, very hard to just drop off your laptop. Some other figures specific to our industry on the IT side. PC shipments were significantly down year over year in the first quarter. Expect to see the same thing out of the second quarter, maybe a little bit of recovery there. It's the biggest downturn since 2013. We're also seeing the same thing on the enterprise side. The enterprise side is interesting. I'll delve into that a little bit more, but we are seeing predicted contraction in the enterprise purchasing side. It's interesting because the scenario here, if you think about servers, there's some sectors of the economy, specifically the public cloud sector, that's probably never had more demand. We're creating demand right now on Zoom for public cloud space. And I've been on some Zoom calls where it seemed like public cloud space was at a premium because there was latency as a result of that. So there's potential for some expansion there, but then you're also having the negative impact again from, I worked at a big company one time, and the very first thing that got cut was our planned capital expenditures. It's always something that can be put off. Seeing some similar negative numbers on the mobility side. So mobility being cell phones and tablets. We saw contraction in the market in the first quarter again. We're predicting an overall, or experts are predicting an overall contraction in the year for the cell phone market. Some of that is, again, back to people are at home. They're not using the same shopping avenues that they would. One of the issues there is the largest market in the world is China for cell phones, and they had probably the most stringent shutdown. So that put a lot of downward pressure on the market. And, we've seen a little bit of recovery here in May, but, still for the year as a whole, it's looking negative. And, speaking of my company, one of the big areas that typically right about now starts to kick in for our company is education market and school districts and schools upgrading equipment and equipment coming into my facility by those actions. And we're seeing the same thing here. We have a few programs going on, but a lot of the schools are wrestling with how can I, swap out tablets this year? I don't want to put people at risk. I don't want to make them go somewhere. Look at all the extra cost if I have to schedule one person coming in at a time. So, a lot of those upgrades look like they're going to be put off, and we're not going to necessarily see the volume. And, we're hearing in some parts of the country that, school closures might even extend into the fall now. So those could be put off even further. Again, the school market with a lot of kids doing school at home puts a lot of demand on the public cloud space, which we hope will be reflected in mitigating some of the capital expenditure offsets in the enterprise market for server, data center storage space, data center memory space. Adam mentioned residential collections. Certainly with quarantines, that was really set back. As he mentioned, we're seeing some recovery as quarantines are lifted. Whether that will return as fast as the economy, because we are, as we put people back to work, whether that type of thing will be a risk that they want to take to get involved in, emptying a closet of some electronics or not, is yet to be seen how fast that market will recover. And then Adam covered very well, the other thing we're dealing with, we're not only dealing with a top line downturn, revenue downturn because of volumes of equipment, but most of us have increased operational costs. So as we plan going forward, we're looking at less revenue potentially and increased costs per employee. The per employee cost of our operation has gone up with PPE cost and testing costs as they come in the door. And then a emerging issue is what's going to happen with the Chinese market. We see as China puts the clamps on Hong Kong, and the other trade issues that are emerging, whether it be through Basel, that, some of the wholesale market that was driven by open markets in China may be negatively impacted. And we're seeing some demand downside because of the contraction in mobile market in China, which is the largest market in the world. So what do we do? What are the positive? What are the negatives? Certainly, in the short term, I think most of companies in this space have seen some downturn in demand. Companies wrestling with how do I do an upgrade in this time, and because of the situation in the economy, do I want to upgrade equipment at all, or do I want to put capital expenditures off? The long-term impact on the capital expenditures largely probably depends on how the economy recovers. And that is the big question that's out there. Again, if I could answer this, I'd quit today and be buying stocks or selling stocks or shorting stocks. And the catchphrase is U-shaped versus V-shaped. A V-shaped recovery, we may have already hit the bottom, and now we're on the upward trend. And hopefully 2020, by the end of 2020, we would have a substantial recovery. U-shaped, we are in a swell or in a swale, and we will be in that swale in the economy for some time. And we might not be looking for a complete recovery till second or third quarter in 2021. From us, in our planning standpoint, I'd tell you how we are looking. I said I'd suggest how we're looking at this. May saw some V-shaped type recovery numbers. Retail spending was up. The industrial index was up by 2.2%. Those are after very big drops in previous months, but that's an upward trend. We're hopeful around that. We personally, as a company, are seeing some increased activity as people come back to work. We're seeing that pent-up demand that's starting to hit. And if we could see the economy recover while the pent-up demand is being addressed, by the time we've gone through the pent-up demand, our hope is that the economy will recover enough that normal business will start to be back in place. I will tell you that we are planning as if it could be a U-shaped recovery, that as we increase volume and productivity around this pent-up demand starting to hit, we're looking at that as potentially a temporary situation, and we're hiring and bringing on people as such, just in case that after this pent-up demand is expired, things like the decrease in the education market and the bad economic times with the high unemployment keep downward pressure on capital spending for a longer period of time. And we look back at 2020, and the best we can say is, hey, we survived. And we spent a lot of time in survival mode. We're kind of hoping that will end, but we are anticipating that 2020 might be survival mode all the way through the fourth quarter potentially. And with that, I have shot through my 10 minutes and almost exhausted the whole time. I apologize for that, but I think we probably got a few minutes for questions.
We do. Thank you, Craig. And we really hope that it's not a W-shaped recovery, right? We don't want that double dip. All right, we do have some time for questions here. As we're, use the chat function to enter your questions. That'll make it easy for everyone to see them. While we're waiting on questions, I did want to highlight that we are planning the next session already, the next educational session. We don't have a date nailed down yet, but it will probably be in a couple of months. We'll focus on R2V3 from the recycler's perspective. So as we're looking at the R2 transition, many of us are certified R2. What does that look like from a recycler's perspective? So we will develop that program in the next couple of months. We did have a question from Steve Levitan. Thank you, Steve, asking about the temperature sensing device that Adam had mentioned that gives the red light, green light, that simple reaction to temperature. And what is it, and what's the approximate cost? Adam, thank you for responding to that in the chat window. Do you want to just add anything to your response there?
All I'll say is that, we ended up buying 4 units, and they're not in yet. They're due to come in. They definitely come from offshore. They're due to come in next week, and I can certainly, anybody that's interested, feel free to reach out, and I can tell you how they work. So we looked at this. We looked at one other. The other was plastic and about 4 times the cost. But I think this is good because, again, you don't have to get too close to an individual. Instead, they just look in. I guess it senses their temperature, shows green or red. See you later. Green, you're free to come in. So.
Yeah, and I've heard about camera-based systems too. I don't know what the expense on those are. But.
I actually looked at one of those also, and it was over 20,000, and
Wow.
it did thermal imaging and
Yeah.
showed the body temperature of an individual, and that's certainly, as we talk about increased costs during this new time, we don't want to add those types of expenses. So,
Indeed. Thank you. Tony, another question that came up, I've heard rumors of concerns that face masks may be causing breathing issues, like, reducing O2 absorption or increasing CO2 that you're breathing in. Do you have any facts around that, or can you mention that?
Yeah, I had heard that also, Reich, and did a little research on it. And in May, there were some viral memes that were going around social media saying that wearing a mask will cause CO2 toxicity. And that's not true. That's not true. The mask, whether it's, you can see an N95 right here, here's a cloth face covering. The N95s are typically, the healthcare professionals and CDC are asking that we keep these for healthcare professionals. So most of us are wearing the cloth face coverings, which are porous and do have openings on the sides and do allow CO2 to escape and oxygen to enter. What I've found with respiratory programs and masks like this is typically when you're asking someone to put a covering over their breathing holes, they get anxious about it. They don't like it. You're telling me how I have to be now, how I have to breathe, and I don't like an authority telling me that. And that's what all of us are dealing with. I think whether it's with family members, loved ones, or workforce. So having an open conversation about the value of the mask and the value of it is that you're protecting others by wearing it. This has a 70% factor rating from what I've read on these, containing your respiratory droplets. And in doing a little further research, I found 3 reasons to wear a mask. And humility is the first one, because I don't know if I have COVID, and I don't want to give it to you. And I don't know if you have someone in your family that you're caring for that you could pass it on to that could get hurt by it. Kindness is the other one. Again, I don't want to pass it on. I'm containing my breathing droplets and my community, whether it's you folks here or the folks in my community, right, generally around me. Again, I want to contain what's inside of me. That's why I'm wearing the mask when I'm around people. Now, if you're someone who's wearing a mask while you're driving around in your car and you're the only person in that car, you're doing it wrong. You're not helping anybody. When you're out in public and you're around people, wear the mask. When you're at work and you're around people, wear the mask. But I would just appeal to all of you who have workforces that you're managing and supervising to communicate this with them. They do look to you as their leaders. And if they see you not wearing PPE, they're going to lose interest in wearing PPE.
Thanks, Tony. So it sounds like the CO2 issue or concern is a little bit of hype and misdirection. Maybe it's there's not a scientific basis for that concern. So, for your typical cloth or surgical mask, right?
Right, and the research I've done on that is that's the case. I'll be happy to provide some links that go along with this presentation, so others can read up on it if they'd like to.
Great.
If I could jump in here too, right? The N95 mask, if you direct someone to wear that as part of their job, they should be fit tested, which means it's a closed seal. And when you're trying to breathe in, you are laboring more than you would on trying to get air in. If you got an underlying health condition, prone to asthma, something like that, it could definitely be bothersome. So that's why there is additional requirement. But when they talk about fit testing, that's making sure that it fits all the way around your breathing area with the tight fit. So it is different. The cloth mask doesn't have those same issues, or not nearly to the extent. But N95, when properly worn and fitted, is going to require you pull all the air into your lungs through that medium.
Great. Thank you, Scott. All right. Let me just remind you, you can use the chat function or raise your hand if you want to ask a question. We are running a little bit long here, so we probably only have time for one or two more questions. I'll jump in here with one more. Adam, you mentioned having employees clean, having time to clean. Are you having them clean their own area? Do you have a separate team that's going around and cleaning different areas, all the areas, or kind of how are you handling that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So all of the above, really. Not only do we have time at the end of each day for the people to clean up their own areas, disinfect their own areas, we have created a full-time position now dedicated to cleaning with a daily checklist of all the different areas, knobs, any sinks, any other high-touch areas. They're going around multiple times a day and wiping down shared surfaces. And then in addition, we've got a third-party crew that comes in now twice a week and is doing a deep cleaning, both of the warehouse and the office. So a lot of money being spent on cleanliness, but and it's a constant struggle or reminder, I should say, not a struggle, but a reminder to our staff that, it feels like, at least in New York was hit really hard, really fast, and now it's kind of moved on, and New York is continuing down while the rest of the country, I know in Craig's neck of the woods, things aren't great, right? The rest of the country's getting worse. New York is kind of starting to open up, and people are starting to get a little bit more lax on social distancing. And it's a constant reminder to our staff that the second that you let your guard down and you get relaxed, we are going to have one case and then 2 cases and then 3 cases. And when that happens, we're going to shut it down completely. I know there's another gentleman that's involved in the electronics division committee, Matt Young, who had to do just that. So we got to be diligent. We got to be clean. We got to constantly sanitize, and that all takes time and energy, and takes time and energy away from the end goal of dismantling as many pounds as you possibly can. But right now, that's become second priority to safety and cleanliness.
Thanks, Adam. Chuck, do we have any other questions that have popped up?
I haven't seen any questions as yet. I got a couple of announcements I want to make sure everybody's aware of. And if you do have questions, we can have a few minutes there for you to type them in. We have a couple more programs that are coming up in the next couple of weeks that might be interesting to you. The first one is next week on June 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Scrap Magazine is doing a presentation via Zoom on business deal disruption and contract considerations to help you with these issues. And then we're going to take a little break for the 4th of July holiday, coming back right afterward with 2 programs back to back on global market recovery. On June 9th at 10 a.m. Eastern, we'll be looking at the Middle East and Asia. And then on June 16th at 11 a.m. Eastern, we'll be looking at recovery in Europe and the Americas. You can sign up for all of those programs at ISRI.org. It'll take you from there to our small meetings registration area. Looks like we don't have any other questions at this time. So if you want to wrap up for us, we certainly do appreciate everybody's participation today, and I'll send it back to you.
And Chuck, I think that there were some comments. I'm not sure if we've mentioned it, but that the presentations will be made available. Is that right?
That's right. Presentations should be available by Monday about this time. It takes about 1 business day to make sure we get them edited properly and get all the corrections if there are any made. So take a look, and I'm certain there'll be an announcement that you'll see when they are available.
Great. Well, I will go ahead and wrap it up now. Tony, Craig, Adam, thank you so much for your time and your expertise that you've brought to the table here. I appreciate that. And do you guys have anything to add, Craig? Anything from the chair?
I'd just say, as we talked about economic issues, keep your eyes open for more information on PPP from ISRI. That's been invaluable. And then watch what's happening on the Hill with the liability protection bill. Billy's keeping up on that. And I think for all of us, it's a concern. Should we be held liable? Should somebody claim that they had a health issue related to COVID from working with us? So keep your eyes and ears open for more on that.
Great.
Certainly, as news breaks, we'll make sure it gets out.
Yeah, that's one of the big values of ISRI membership that I've seen over the years is just awareness of what's going on and helping us respond to that. So thank you, ISRI, for that. All right. With that, I think we're done. Thank you all for sharing this time with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.